You know that feeling when someone you love looks at you like they want to scream, but they can't? That was the last thing I saw in my daughter Emily's eyes on the morning after her wedding. If you think you already know what happened, you don't. Because what I found inside that house changed everything I believed about family, trust, and the people we welcome into our lives. Before I continue, if you enjoy emotional, true-style family stories that keep you guessing until the very end, subscribe to channel name. It helps us tell more stories like this, and you won't want to miss the next one. My name is Robert. I'm 70 years old now, and I've spent most of my life believing that experience teaches you how to recognize danger. I worked hard, raised my daughter the best I could after losing my wife many years ago, and thought I understood people. Emily was my whole world. She was kind, smart, and always smiling. Even when life became difficult, she found a reason to laugh. When she introduced me to Daniel, I wanted to believe he was the right man. He was polite. He held doors open. He called me sir. Everyone in town thought he was respectful. Maybe that should have made me feel better, but something about him never settled in my heart. It wasn't anything I could prove. It was just the way he watched people when they weren't looking. His smile always disappeared the moment he thought no one could see him. Emily insisted I was worrying too much. She said I was being an overprotective father. Maybe she was right. I tried to convince myself that every father feels nervous before his daughter gets married. The wedding was beautiful. Friends filled the church with laughter. Music echoed through the hall. Emily looked happier than I had ever seen her. When she hugged me before walking down the aisle, she whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on me." I smiled, but I couldn't explain why my hands were shaking. That evening, everyone celebrated late into the night. Daniel and Emily left for the small guest house on his family's property. It was only 20 minutes away, and they wanted privacy before leaving on their honeymoon. The next morning, I expected a cheerful phone call. It never came. Around noon, I called Emily. No answer. I called again. Nothing. Daniel finally answered his own phone. His voice sounded calm, almost too calm. He said Emily wasn't feeling well and wanted to rest. Something about the silence behind his words made my stomach tighten. Emily never ignored my calls, not once in her entire life. So, I got into my truck and drove straight to the guest house. The front door wasn't locked. That was the first thing that frightened me. The second was the silence. No television, no music, no footsteps. Only the sound of the old wooden floor beneath my boots. I called Emily's name. No answer. Then I noticed tiny red drops leading down the hallway. At first, I told myself it couldn't be blood. Then I reached the bedroom door. The door was slightly open. I pushed it with one hand, and the room felt colder than the rest of the house. Emily was sitting on the floor beside the bed, with her knees pulled against her chest. Her wedding dress had been changed, but she was still wearing the same necklace I had given her when she turned 18. Her hands were trembling so badly she could barely hold on to it. There were dark red stains on the hardwood floor, and my heart nearly stopped. I rushed toward her, asking if she was hurt. She didn't answer. She just stared at the wall, as if she couldn't even see me standing there. I knelt beside her and gently touched her shoulder. She flinched so hard that I pulled my hand away. Then, without looking at me, she whispered, "Don't let him know I'm talking to you." Every instinct I had told me something terrible had happened. I looked around the room for Daniel, but he wasn't there. The bathroom was empty. The closet was open. His suitcase was gone. Emily's suitcase, however, was still packed exactly where she had left it. None of it made sense. I asked where Daniel was. She swallowed hard before saying he had gone into town to buy breakfast. Her voice was barely louder than a breath. She kept looking toward the window, almost expecting him to appear at any second. I had never seen fear like that in my daughter's eyes. I told her we were leaving immediately. She grabbed my wrist with surprising strength and shook her head. If he comes back and we're gone, he'll know. I asked what she meant, but she wouldn't explain. Instead, she pointed toward the guest room across the hall. Please, look under the bed before you say anything. I walked across the hallway, my pulse pounding in my ears. The guest room looked untouched. The bed was neatly made. The curtains were closed. For a second, I thought she was confused. Then I got down on one knee and looked underneath the bed. There was a small black phone wrapped inside a towel. It wasn't Emily's. When I turned it on, the battery still had a little charge left. The screen lit up with dozens of missed calls from one contact, simply labeled Mom. Before I could scroll further, I noticed something else. The photo on the lock screen wasn't Daniel. It was a young woman I had never seen before. She was smiling at the camera, wearing what looked like an engagement ring. A cold feeling ran through my body. Why would another woman's phone be hidden under the bed in the house where my daughter had spent her wedding night? I carried it back to Emily without saying a word. The moment she saw it, tears filled her eyes. She whispered, "He forgot to destroy it." I asked whose phone it was. She looked at me for a long moment before answering. It belonged to the woman who lived through this before me. Those words hit me harder than anything else that morning. I wanted to call the police immediately, but Emily grabbed my arm again. "No," she said. "Not yet. They'll believe him unless we have proof." I stared at her in disbelief. "What proof?" She nodded toward the phone in my hand. "Everything is inside there." Just then, we heard the sound of tires crunching on the gravel outside. Daniel was back. Emily's face turned completely white. Without another word, she pushed the phone into my jacket pocket and whispered, "Whatever happens, don't tell him you found it." The front door slowly opened, and his footsteps echoed through the house. He called out with the same friendly voice everyone admired, "Honey, your father got here early." I looked at Emily. She lowered her head and said nothing. But I already knew one thing. The man who had married my daughter was hiding a secret far darker than anyone could imagine.